Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. My name is Avery, and I'm your host. These next few episodes are going to be old Patreon episodes that patrons have heard, but everybody else has not. I've shared that the Patreon is shifting. I can't keep up with 2 episodes every single week, and so instead of doing an extra bonus episode on the Patreon every week, I'm going to do one monthly energetic prediction video or episode for that, and then we're still doing our monthly meetings. So if you're interested in hanging out with us and discussing like a workshop topic every week, or just kind of sharing about our lives and what's going on, and just sharing the everyday woo-woo things that we have going on, it's really fun, and I've just really enjoyed getting to know women over there. So that'll be linked if you're interested in checking that out. Also, of course, I am super busy with readings and mentorships. So if you're interested in a psychic read or a mentorship, I do have one more spot as far as mentorships open starting in August. So if you're interested in that, all of that will be linked in the show notes. So these next few episodes, again, are going to be old Patreon episodes, and then we will go back to our regular scheduled programming in terms of recording new episodes and interviews and guests on the podcast and all of that fun stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to leave a review. It really, really, really helps. And I'll see you in the next one. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. This is a Patreon episode. Today, we're talking about dark attachments. How they form, how they function, and what to do about them. I feel like maybe I'm a little bit early. This could have been a good Halloween episode because it's kind of a spooky topic, right? This freaks a lot of people out. That's why I thought it'd be a good Patreon episode for those of you who are ready to, dig into the slightly more taboo topics. That being said, I think this episode will surprise you in that I think a lot of people picture dark entities or dark attachments in this really horror film type of way, and I don't think it's quite as scary nor as common as people tend to think. So hopefully this episode actually gives you a little bit of peace of mind. But let's break this topic down. What even is a dark attachment? So for this context, for this episode, we're going to consider a dark attachment as an energetic pattern or presence that latches on to a person's energy field and changes or manipulates how that person feels, thinks, or behaves. It can be really subtle, like influencing your mood or your thoughts, not overtaking. This is not like possession, okay? Just having a subtle influence. Or this can be more overt, like someone feeling extreme mood swings or intense pressure to act or do a certain thing. And quick disclaimer, I just want to say, not every uncomfortable experience that we're going to talk about is an attachment. A lot of times it's just stress or sleep deprivation or unresolved trauma in your own body. This is more like if you've ruled out all of those things and you're still having this very persistent pattern of negative emotion and negative habits that you feel, it's almost like it feels very foreign or manipulated, that's when we might look into a dark attachment. So these are a possibility, but they're certainly not the most common cause when you are struggling. Also, I'm not an expert on this topic by any means. I'm just sharing what I know, but there are certainly people who are very spiritually experienced in this realm and dealing with specific dark entities and dark attachments. I am not claiming to be an expert. This is just 101 information. So for the sake of this podcast, again, a dark entity, if I use the word entity or being, that would be more like an actual conscious living creature, right? I don't know a good word, not human, but something that is considered alive. And that certainly exists. That is not something you are likely to run into. And that is a much more foreign topic to the average person. So we're not going down that road. Not today, anyway. We are talking about dark attachments that are not like a living being. This is more like an energetic presence, a field of energy. It has influence, but it doesn't necessarily have its own agenda. Okay, so think of it like a magnetic pull, okay? Like a magnet, it has influence over other magnets, but it doesn't have an agenda. It just acts a certain way based on its existence. Does that make sense? Dark attachments form when 3 things come together: repeated emotional charge, like ongoing fear, ongoing shame, focused attention or belief, like ruminating on something or storytelling this same belief over and over. And the third thing being an opening in the host, which would be caused by something like physical depletion, like feeling super tired, feeling really sad or upset, having a lot of trauma, being dissociated, like basically being in a low frequency state where your field is not protected. So basically, it's if the same painful feelings keep being replayed over and over in someone and you are emotionally vulnerable, like you're in a state like, depletion, trauma, dissociation, that energy, negative energy, can kind of congeal into a persistent pattern that behaves like a separate thing. Does that make sense? Think of it like this. Think of it like you're making bread with dough and you're making this dough. That dough could turn into a great loaf of bread. Or if you just let that dough sit there in the open air, it's going to turn moldy and gross and it's going to rot. The dough is like your emotions, but what you do with that dough is what turns it into a positive or negative experience. So you could process the emotion or release it and turn it into a loaf of bread, or you could let it sit. And that's that ruminating beliefs and ruminating thought patterns happening over and over and over again. That's like letting the dough sit out and mold. Like it could go one of two ways. And if those negative patterns just sit and sit and sit, eventually it turns into a whole entire new ecosystem. So literally, this can be something of your own creation. So when you hear dark attachments, or sometimes you'll hear dark entities, our brain goes straight to like scary movies, right? We go to like exorcisms and these really scary depictions of people being like possessed by demons and all of these things. That is incredibly rare and requires a very specific set of circumstances. I'm not going to say that it's impossible. I don't think it's something you need to worry about, especially if you are conscious enough to be sitting here listening to a podcast like this one. What can be more common is these negative thought patterns that kind of, like I said, snowball into this like swirling cloud of energy, right? This like storm cloud that can kind of attach to you, or someone else's could attach to you if you are very empathic and you tend to soak up that energy. If you are, say, around a negative person who ruminates a lot and who has a lot of that low vibrational energy that is just swirling around them consistently, and you can pick up on that. So it's less like a demonic possession and more like you have a tick or something. Because again, this is something that we talk about a lot. But the way that energy works is, like is magnetized to like. And energy is constantly moving from one state to another state to another state, right? It can't be created or destroyed, but it's constantly transitioning. And so negative energy can always be transmuted into positive energy or released so that at least it's out of your body. But your positive energy can also be brought down into a very negative state. And if it sits there long enough, that's when it starts to, again, turn into this really intense, like storm cloud. It's like the more intense the energy gets, the more energy you add to it and add to it and add to it, add to it. It's like a storm cloud. I'm giving so many analogies, but this is kind of a confusing topic. And these are the things that help me kind of frame it better in my mind. But it's a very intense energy. Emotions, the stronger the emotion, the more intense it is. And so the more intense emotion you have, the stronger the force is behind that emotion. Does that make sense? How many times can I say, does that make sense? Okay, and when that happens, it splits off from someone's psyche. So basically, feelings, memories, or responses are kind of formed into this storm cloud, and then they become disconnected because they were too painful or too shameful to be integrated by that person at the time. And to be clear, this isn't something that would happen in like a week. This is like months or maybe years of these constant, consistent feelings over and over and over. Just kind of like you form a habit, you can form this negative energy cycle. But these attachments are not beings in a human sense, but it's just an energetic pattern, a thought form, a field that operates in momentum, not by its own will. Okay, so now that we understand kind of like how it got here, why do these quote unquote attach to you? Because again, like attracts like. Dark attachments need energy to feed off of because they are energetically incomplete, like a parasite. They lack an internal self-sustaining source of vitality like a human does. Like you are an energy source in yourself. This ball of energy over here cannot sustain itself. It needs a host. So like a magnet, it attaches itself to a similar frequency in the form of a host, and then they can siphon like small amounts of energy from a vulnerable person and maintain its form. But again, it's like a functional thing rather than a moral thing. Like this does not have a consciousness where it's like, I'm going to feed off of this person, where it has an agenda. It's like an energetic survival instinct. So just like a parasite, it needs fuel to persist, to live, and human emotional fields provide that fuel when there is repeated negative charges and when your field is open and vulnerable. Now, why don't positive or high vibrational energies attach in the same way? Because they are self-sustaining and they have their own form of a life force. That positive energy is much more powerful than the negative energy. It's much stronger. And so a positive high frequency energy can support itself, can amplify itself without draining something else. Okay, so hopefully now that I've kind of broken that down, it's a little bit less scary than this idea of like demonic possession that everybody, really thinks just seems to be rampant, and it's really not. It certainly exists, but it requires so much negative energy. In order for a true negative life force to be created, it takes a lot of dark energy, like a horrible murder scene that was just like an all-out slaughter sort of energy. And that happens, and so these things do exist, but you're not likely to run into one unless really you're kind of like seeking it out, like these people who go into haunted houses and things like that. I don't recommend that. I would not do that. I don't think that's a wise choice. So back to like a normal, maybe negative attachment, not an entity. How does it manifest in the body, in the mind, in your life? Okay. In your body, attachments can show up as, again, unexplained fatigue. And now you could just be tired, okay? It could be that you're tired because you're stressed. So don't just assume that you have some sort of negative attachment just because you're tired. But this is more for like awareness, okay? It can show up as unexplained fatigue, pressure in the chest or the head, not being able to sleep, just generally your body being very unsettled, like something is off. And the more aware you are of those physical signs, the more you will be able to detect something like this very early on. You would also likely feel like you would also likely be experiencing an uptick in very intrusive, repetitive thoughts, a sudden mood like avalanche where it's just all of a sudden very intense emotions, compulsions, behavior that contradicts your values, that doesn't feel like you, where you're kind of like, I don't know what's gotten into me. This doesn't feel like me at all. I feel like I'm my own worst enemy. And this is where it really starts to have a very negative effect on your overall life, because that can obviously affect your overall life trajectory. You can have repeated setbacks. You can have relationship sabotage. You can have inexplicable blocks in your work or in your income, your creativity. And all of these external things often are just mirroring the energy that is happening inside of your body. And so again, for a lot of people aren't thinking, oh, I might have some extra negative energy that doesn't belong to me or that is like kind of attached to me, that could be affecting me, because people don't really understand how energy works. We are just now getting to a place where we're really starting to scrape the surface in terms of quantum physics and how these things work and how they affect us, right? People are more likely to understand the idea of the very rare demonic possession type of thing where you have convulsions and theatrical voices and it's just a complete takeover of your body. This scenario is mostly fiction, and it's not really a realistic model for the real world experiences that most people would have. Real life, even severe cases in real life, would look more like a progressive loss of control, kind of hearing voices like bipolar or schizophrenia type behavior, major functional decline, like true medical psychiatric emergencies. But even then, it's more likely to come across as schizophrenia or bipolar, not dark entity attachment. even if that's what it is. Much more commonly, it's going to be much less dramatic. It's going to be like minor interference rather than a major takeover of your entire life. But it'll be like, again, recurring intrusive thoughts, destabilizing your mood, not sleeping very well, just constantly feeling drained. It's serious, but it's not a horror movie. And this type of attachment can be transmuted because, again, it's not its own autonomous entity. It's just condensed negative energy. Like, for example, a really deep wound of shame or grief that has kind of created this storm cloud. Then you can transmute that. You can reintegrate that through therapy, through energetic healing, Reiki, meditation. Not in a day, but certainly it can be done. That energy can be healed and transmuted back into positive energy. It can be released out of your body, and you can move on from that. If it truly were its own conscious entity, that's something that would need someone who is a spiritual practitioner, who is experienced with these types of entities. And that would be more like a cleansing, a dislodging of sorts, a releasing to essentially remove it from your energetic field. So in simpler terms, more minor negative attachments can be dissolved when attention and emotional charge stop feeding them. So when you transmute that energy and you're no longer sitting in that negative spiral, that negative energetic loop, then they have nothing to feed off of. Whereas something that's a more intense actual entity, still not a horror movie, but even if it is an actual entity, that would need more like a professional removal, cleansing, etc. And honestly, it's really good just on the daily. I do this daily, just a simple, like right now I'm setting the intention to release or detach from any negative energy or entity that is attached to my body or my auric field in any way, shape, or form. I just do a quick release like that every day. But it's also good to maybe take a little bit more time and do it a little bit more intentionally, like every week, every couple of weeks, as often as you can, just honestly, because it's good spiritual hygiene. Okay, and that way you can kind of have this peace of mind because remember, you are much more powerful than you probably realize. Nothing like this can attach to you without your permission, whether that's intentional permission or whether that's just sitting in that low vibrational state where you're very vulnerable. Okay, this is kind of like keeping up with your spiritual immune system. The higher vibrational, the higher your energy is and tends to be, the stronger your spiritual immune system is. And then your everyday actions also play a big part. So stay hydrated, make sure you're getting enough sleep, put your feet on the ground, like literal grounding, a breath work, meditation, healthy foods, movement, all of those things. All of these things help your body stay in a positive energetic space. Okay, so you're supporting that positive energy from the outside and from the inside. Repetition matters more than anything. Those small, consistent actions, doing those little things every day, build up your immune system. Just like you can't fix your immune system in a day where you can't have a really low immune system and then fix it and go really high in a day, same thing with your spiritual immune system. And remember, always rule out medical and mental health causes first, because these can look really similar. It's very possible that you just have dysregulated hormones, or maybe you're reacting poorly to a medication, or there's something else going on. Now, everything that happens physically in your body does have an emotional tie, but I say this to say, if you're feeling bad, don't assume that an energetic dark attachment is the most likely scenario. So what are some practices that you can actually do, like the one I mentioned, to, again, support keeping your spiritual immune system clear? Okay, number one, like I said, just intention. I'm now setting the intention to disconnect or release any dark or negative entity or energies from my body or my auric field. That's a long sentence when I have to say it out loud. You can visualize cord cutting in your mind. You can imagine a protective ball of light around your body. You can just take a shower and envision the water rinsing any negative energy or attachments off of you. Water's very powerful. Get outside in the sun. Put your feet on the bare earth. All of these things are immediate, right now tools that can help reduce that negative energy and stop feeding the pattern. And again, if you want to take it to the next level, go see a Reiki practitioner. Go see an energetic healer. Go see a quantum practitioner. Go see an acupuncturist. And go to therapy, right? Mental health care and energetic work both combine into the most powerful way to cleanse both your body and your mind. Also, I mentioned this in the last episode, but incense or sage, Palo Santo, any of those energetic clearing tools are really great to have around your house or just when you feel yourself getting into some sort of energetic slump. I always instantly feel the energetic release whenever I burn Palo Santo mainly, but also sage. Also music, there's sound frequency, sound healing. There's just so many tools that are becoming more and more mainstream. They're even using, this is a little bit off topic, but since I mentioned it, they are even now using sound frequency machines. There are some hospitals, I saw a whole video about this. There's some hospitals that are actually adopting sound frequency machines to do things like shrink tumors and things that they can't get to surgically. They're using sound healing. So this is definitely something that is becoming more popular, and it does work. And you don't have to use a fancy hospital machine. You can literally use music or YouTube videos. Go outside and listen to the birds. Listen to the ocean. Listen to a creek. These are all very healing frequencies. So even if you were to have an attachment or some dark energetic parasite of some sort, this is not a moral failing on your part. It's not an emergency, you're not dying, there's not a demonic takeover happening. It's just an indicator that you have maybe been vulnerable, open, sensitive, exposed in a way that just requires some care. It just requires a boost of your immune system. So just like you would when you're sick, this is not like we need to go to the ER. This is like we have a cold at home and we're going to use the tools that we have to our disposal and take care of ourselves in the best way that we know how. You're looking out for the signs, you know what to look for, you know what it feels like, or at least you're learning that by listening to this episode, and then you can support yourself in a healthy spiritual way. So this episode wasn't super long, but I hope that you have now just a better understanding, and hopefully you don't feel so spooked by the idea of a dark attachment. This is not The Exorcism of Emily Rose, okay? That was like the last horror movie I ever watched, and I was so terrified, I stopped watching scary movies after that. I don't think I've watched one since. And that was like in high school or whatever it was. I don't watch those anymore. And I wouldn't recommend you watch them either, honestly, if you're concerned about dark energy, because that can definitely play a role. Okay, that's it for today, guys. Personal psychic readings and whatever else you need is all linked in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.